Hello, and welcome to MAGA, the podcast. I am your host, the Disgusted American, and I appreciate all of you tuning in today. Let's get to it. Now, who is this podcast for? What is it all about? We're going to be talking about the greatest heist in American political history. Back in 2016, Don the Con went from laughingstock candidate to leader of the free world. People are always asking, how did this happen? How could this happen? Well, in this podcast, we're going to explore exactly how this happened the first time so we can see why it's happening again. In terms of who this is for, if you're a pissed off Democrat, independent, even disenchanted Republicans looking for answers as the hellscape of Trump 2.0 descends upon us, you are in the right place. So before we get into our first episode, just want to take a few moments to talk about why I wrote MAGA in the first place. It all started during the pandemic pandemonium. I was a consultant. I did live sessions around the nation, and suddenly my business came to a screeching halt. For a while there, I started to wonder if I was even in business anymore. The world had stopped. It was hard to tell. On top of that, I lived in another state, and suddenly I couldn't fly to see my kids. So I, like many Americans, looked to our nation's leader to give us wisdom and comfort while people were panicking and dying. And what does our president, the leader of the free world, tell a trembling nation?
Are there words about a pandemic at this point?
No, we're not at all, and we have it totally under control. It's one person.
Oh, well, that's a relief. It's just one person, and Trump's in total control. This whole thing will be over by Tuesday.
Tonight, you're minimizing the risk, the danger of the virus. Are you telling the Americans, except for the ones who are sick, not to change any of their behaviors?
No, I think you have to always, I do it a lot anyway, as you probably heard. Wash your hands, stay clean. You don't have to necessarily grab every handrail unless you have to. You do certain things that you do when you have the flu. I mean, view this the same as the flu. When somebody sneezes, I try and bail out as much as possible when they're sneezing.
So we just have to treat it like the flu? That doesn't sound so bad. Just have to wash your hands and not sneeze on people. This thing will be over by Tuesday.
But you don't hear them talking about COVID. To be specific, COVID-19. That name gets further and further away from China as opposed to calling it the Chinese virus.
Perfect. Let's throw in a little racism while people are freaking out. I'm sure Asian Americans won't get terrorized at all.
A question that probably some of you are thinking of if you're totally into that world, which I find to be very interesting. So supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right. And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me. So we'll see. But the whole concept of the light, the way it kills it in 1 minute, that's pretty powerful.
Over 1 million Americans have died from COVID. Now, look, people will still have died, whether Trump is president or not. But Trump's apathy and his willful ignorance ignited COVID misinformation and anti-vaxxer hysteria. Like he does most of the time, he took a bad problem and made it way, way worse.
This was something that happened that was, some people would say, an act of God. I don't view it as an act of God. I would view it as something that just surprised the whole world.
The fuckity fuck. Why was the president of the United States saying batshit crazy nonsense? And I remember during these moments in the pandemic, looking to the heavens and praying and saying, dear, sweet baby Jesus, how did this fool become president of the United States? So I went in hard to learn how Trump actually pulled this off. So let's begin our story. Once upon a time, there was episode 1, the big bad wolf. Now, when we think about why Trump actually ran, it helps to rewind a bit back to 2015 to see what was going on in his life. So it happened officially in August 2015, but way before then, Trump knew he was being fired from The Apprentice. Ratings were tanking, and NBC wanted to replace him with Schwarzenegger. He was about to be terminated by the Terminator. So Trump needed a new gambit to reclaim his name from the loser pile. Now we have to remember, he already declared his 6th bankruptcy, not 5, 4, 3, 6th bankruptcy in 2009. And his finances are so disastrous from all these bankruptcies that between 2011 and 2014, he didn't pay a dime in personal federal income taxes. In fact, in 2016, the year he became the most powerful person in the world, he paid $750 in taxes. Not $750 million, not $750,000, not even $7,500. 750. So he needed a way to keep the gravy train running now that he was being canceled from his own show. Now, wouldn't you know it, the perfect job for a narcissistic lunatic just happened to be available. Now, what was his dream job that was perfect for Trump? The big bad wolf in a presidential primary. Now, this is a common role. There's one in every presidential cycle. If you go back far enough, you'll find the OG of crazy, Pat Buchanan.
I don't think it's the vision the American people need to get the economy moving again, and it's certainly not the long-term strategy to make America first again.
Okay, so let's do a quick side quest here. Because did you hear what Pat Buchanan just said? Make America first. Now, doesn't that sound awfully familiar? Buchanan said this back in 1992. In fact, Ronald Reagan said make America great again in 1980. So MAGA's not new. It's not original. It's not real. It's Fantasyland nonsense that breeds sexism, racism, heterosexism, xenophobia, transphobia. Honestly, you can throw in any ism or phobia into MAGA's toxic stew. That's really the message of MAGA stew, isn't it? Don't ask what's in it, just eat it. Boo, just fucking boo. All right, let's get back to the big bad wolves of yesteryear. Maybe you recall Rick the Prick Santorum.
We birthed a nation from nothing. I mean, there's nothing here. I mean, yes, we have Native Americans, but candidly, that there isn't much Native American culture in American culture.
And who could ever forget Michelle batshit Bachmann?
We have seen an orgy that leads to the personal enslavement of individuals. Because if you're involved in the gay and lesbian lifestyle, it's bondage. It is personal bondage, personal despair, and personal enslavement. Not all cultures are equal. Not all values are equal.
Now, the common denominator for all of these big bad wolves just have to be an unhinged jackass. Like I said, the perfect job for Trump. No acting required. He could just be himself. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. You're just meant to get people riled up. You beam down from cloud cuckoo land and just say loony shit. But you're never meant to win, right? Because if you think about the stories we heard growing up, the big bad wolf and the Three Little Pigs and in Little Red Riding Hood, they didn't win. They're meant to be the villain. They're meant to scare everyone so they can get saved by the true hero of the story. And in 2016, that hero was supposed to be Jeb Bush. He was the one who was going to make the homie say ho and the girlies want to scream. He had all the goodies in the picnic basket. He had the big money boys to provide a giant war chest of cold, hard cash. He had name recognition, unbelievable name recognition. His father was president. His brother was president. He was coming off of a successful run as a governor of Florida. So he had an established field operation and a strong track record of executive governance.
So our country's on a very bad course. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? The question for me is, what am I going to do about it? And I've decided I'm a candidate for President of the United States of America.
Jeb was the prince, and 2016 was the year he was going to inherit the kingdom. At the end of the day, this is why the big bad wolf always loses. Without access to the goodies in the hero's picnic basket, the wolf eventually starves to death. That was it. That was the story. Tale as old as time. Trump should have growled and howled for a few months and then starved to death. And if he had, we all would have lived happily ever after. If you look back in 2015, week of June 14th, back when Trump first announced his candidacy, he was polling at about 1%, according to NBC News. 1%. It's 1% more than you and me. We weren't even running in the race. But we all know that this fairy tale doesn't have a happy ending. So what the hell happened? Why didn't the big bad wolf starve? Who fed it? That's going to be where we pick up the story next week. We'll be dropping new episodes of MAGA the podcast every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time. And in episode 2, we're going to introduce our first freak of the week, the man who found our starving big bad wolf, the man who started to feed him and take care of him until the wolf got big enough and strong enough to huff and puff and blow our White House down. It's important to remember that Trump didn't do all this alone. It takes a village of villains to raise a man-child. And in that next episode, we'll meet our first accomplice, the man, the myth, the legend, the self-proclaimed Prince of Darkness. And that, my fellow disgusted Americans, brings us to the end of our first show. You can help our show get big enough and strong enough to expose the big bad wolf and end this nightmare by 2028. So we don't all get MAGA 2 Electric Boogaloo starring JD fans. How can you help support the show? 3 ways. 1, please subscribe to the podcast. That way you'll get notified as soon as new episodes drop. 2nd, please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever platform you use to stream. And finally, please share this episode with family and friends. One final note before we wrap for today. You may be asking, hey, why is this guy anonymous? Well, it's because I live in South Florida, and shit is more than a little ominous around here. We got a lot of unhinged, belligerent people stomping around in full Trump regalia all the time. And I don't really feel like being attacked with a hammer by some psycho in a Publix. So thank you all again for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you in episode 2, The Prince of Darkness, again coming out next Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time. Until we meet again, my friends. Ciao. Bacalao.